Kent Keene, United States Army, Vietnam. Ken is one of the first Vietnam veterans I ever interviewed. I met him in Wichita, Kansas. It was January 11, 2006, over 17 years ago. Kent's still with us today, doing well. And he has an amazing story, serving with the 1st Air Cavalry, B Company, 2nd of the 8th, and he was in a Blackfoot platoon. They had Indian names, Blackfoot platoon, in Vietnam. And again, an amazing story. One of my veterans that is featured in my documentary, my most watched video, which is called Vietnam Remembered. And folks, I've interviewed veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. I've done a video on 9/11, the World Trade Center attacks, Holocaust survivors, and other projects. So this is just a great opportunity for me to share these stories with you today. And I want to thank Barry Lewis. Barry is one of my new sponsors. Barry, God bless you, sir, has such a heart for the Vietnamese people. He's worked with them and around them, and really has seen the suffering that they endured during the Vietnam War. And Barry served in the Royal UK Air Force. I hope I said that right, the UK Royal Air Force. And so he served in the military, and I just want to thank you, Barry. I want to salute you, look in that camera and say, God bless you, and he will, for helping me with my work, folks. And my heart's full today. Today is actually February the 3rd, the day the music died, when Buddy Holly's plane crashed 64 years ago today. You can tell I'm a person of history. Buddy Holly is the inspiration behind the music that I play, and a little plug for Buddy and the Big Bopper and Richie Valens, who perished in that crash 64 years ago. I've interviewed Larry Holly, who's Buddy Holly's brother, Larry Holly. 11 years ago today, I interviewed Larry Holly, and he speaks of his brother Buddy on a short video that I have. But Larry was a Marine, once Marine, always a Marine, served in World War II, so I have his story also. Oh, amen. I'm so grateful. Okay, folks, if you would like to become a sponsor, or if I can encourage you to become a sponsor, I would like to do so at this moment. There's information in the video description on my website. You can click on LarryCapetto.com. At the top of the screen, sponsor a vet. You'll see a page with a lot of faces. Choose one of those veterans if you want to sponsor one, if you can. And if you can't, no worries. I'm glad you're watching these videos. I know a lot of you are getting a lot out of them. If you'd like to donate to my work, there's information in the comment section of this video. So, Kent Keene, I salute you, sir. Thank you for telling me your story 17 years ago in Wichita, and I'm happy to share it with the world. Again, Barry Lewis, thank you for making it possible. And just share these stories, folks. Subscribe to this channel. Let's keep this thing going. Our young people need to hear these stories, especially in the day that we're living in now, where our country has become so divided. And we seem to be fighting for the same freedoms in our own country today that our veterans fought for on foreign soil, you know. So let's stand strong. Amen. God bless you. Kent is a K-E-E-N-E?
Right,
Okay.
right.
You were with the 1st Air Cav.
Right.
Tell me the whole breakdown. You said the 1st and the 8th, and what were you saying now?
I was B Company, 2nd of the 8th. It's a battalion, and it's just a way they identify where you're at. But we were B Company, and they have a division in there, and I don't know how they break it down actually. And I think we had 3 to 4 platoons in our company, and each platoon had an Indian name. and I was
Oh,
in
is that right?
I was in Blackfoot platoon.
Huh.
And every third or fourth night we switched around our mission, which was to ambush the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Tell me just briefly now, Vietnam, your involvement, and you were in 69?
69.
And 70?
Right.
Okay.
I come home in 70.
Okay. You know, I've been interviewing World War II guys for so long, so as I transition into Vietnam and the questioning, some of it will probably be similar, but I'm interested in what you did as far as your experience in combat or around that, and anything to do with the helicopters. And now you showed me a picture of the AH-1, called the Cobra.
Cobra.
Now, did you guys work with the Hueys too, or the Cobra, just the Cobras?
Yes. Now, the Cobras we called Blue Max.
Okay.
They had the blue canopy on there. And if we run into problems and got ambushed, we called in the Blue Max. And they'd come out, and they had a lot of firepower on them, and they were fast, very quick, in and out, and they saved us many a time.
Tell me a little bit about Vietnam, just in general. I mean, you know, you hear a lot of things today. I mean, and a lot of the guys aren't going to talk about it, but you know, that's why I'm grateful that you're here today. But just a brief overview of Vietnam, and maybe comparing it to World War II and to Korea and the Vietnam. What are your thoughts about warfare in Vietnam versus maybe World War II?
Well, it was a guerrilla warfare there. I mean, you didn't capture something and keep it. You just like Hamburger Hill. You took it and then you left, and you may have to come back and do it again. And we never understood quite what the deal was, but it was kind of a guerrilla warfare. And when I first stepped off the airplane, it was the worst smell I'd ever smelled. And we found out later why, but everybody nicknamed it the dump because it's what it smelled like when you first got off till you got used to it. But later on we found out why they called it that, because all the shacks the people lived in, all the sewers would run right in open ditches right between the huts they lived in. And but Vietnam, they said don't trust anybody. You saw a lot of the young girls that were part French and part Vietnamese because the French had been over there, and just like the Amerasians after we left, and they learned to make French bread from the French. It was quite an experience because they just said, you know, just don't associate with them. But of course, GIs go to all the bars and stuff down in Saigon, and that movie that Robin Williams was in was pretty accurate. Adrian Cronauer, when the DJ, and the government, the higher ups, they tried to control how things were, the kind of music you listen to, and all that, and it isn't what we really wanted. But it was a controlled war. All the officers had a status symbol. It was either body count or prisoners taken. It's like they compared it with each other. And when I first got out in the jungle, I found out that this second lieutenant had $500 on his head, and I said, whoa. And I couldn't understand why that was, and they said, well, because he's wanting to go wherever he thinks there's enemy, just to get a good body count. It looks good on his record. And people said, that gets us all wounded and killed, and we don't want that. So they had 500, and I said, well, one morning, about 3 in the morning, there was a chopper came in and left, and nobody paid attention. Next morning we got up, and his hammock was gone, and all his stuff. Well, I guess the brass got wind of it and got him out of there before anything had happened, because the next firefight, I don't think he'd have been around.
Can just tell me, I know there's probably a lot of things that you can think about and talk about today, but can you just tell me some of the skirmishes or when you confronted the enemy, just give me some of the stories that happened in Vietnam that stand out in your mind, and describe them to me if there were helicopters being used, and then your job as what you specifically did in the Army. So just give me some stories of what happened.
Well, we got ferried out in a Chinook. Everybody called it a hook. And there was a process there. You left the 90th Replacement Battalion in like around Saigon. You got taken out to a place, we went to Quan Loy, which is close to An Khê. It was close to a little village, and then they had that all ringed around. They had the big red one guarding three fields of the perimeter, and then the 1st Air Cav had the other, but that's where all the choppers took off from. And you went to headquarters, you got your assignment, and then you were sent to LZ. I was sent to LZ St. Barbara over by the Cambodian border. And from there, they assigned you and sent you out within 9 to 10 miles into the jungle somewhere, and our mission was to ambush the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the regulars coming down from Hanoi, the regular troops. And I went out as a rifleman. I was originally supposed to be an 81 millimeter mortar crew gunner, but some PSC decided that wasn't what he was going to have me do after I had trained 3 years and was an expert at it, which didn't make me too happy. I was very upset about that. But I went on ahead and did it. And we went out, and 2 hours after I was there, we all got logged up. We got put our C rations and got everything in there, and the choppers dropped us in the jungle. And I was called a newbie or a cherry, and there was about 3 of us going out that day. And we got in there. Of course, we didn't know what it was all about, and we got assigned to the squad and the platoon, and so we got all packed up, and we started to take off. Never walk on the trail. That was what they said. Don't ever walk on the trail. Walk parallel to it, even if you have to hack through the jungle, because there's booby traps, and they know the GIs will take the easy route, so we got to go where it's not. So we took off, and within 2 hours of me landing in the jungle, getting packed up and heading out, we were ambushed. Scared to death. I didn't know what it was all about yet. All I knew was that an AK would sound like Greenie Stickum caps going off. And I was scared to death, and I just let that rucksack push me down to the ground as fast as it would, and I happened to land behind 2 little trees growing together, and everybody in front of me got hit and wounded. But after it was all over, I happened to look in front, and they'd riddled those trees right where they grew like this. So if they hadn't been there, they'd probably got my helmet. And the VC, they hit and run. They don't stick around. A few of them, they hit and throw a couple of grenades, and then they're out of there. And I was so scared I was crying, and I'll admit it, because I'd never been fired at in my life. And after that, within 2 weeks, I was a veteran. I don't know, it didn't bother me anymore. I got over it. But it was like that movie, Platoon, with Charlie Sheen in it. I was him, because the first two weeks, I couldn't hump that stuff, carrying an extra 80 pounds on my back. I felt like I wanted to throw up all the time, and they kept saying, go, 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 and I said, man, I don't know how I'm going to do this for a year. But within a couple of weeks, your body adapts to that, and you can make it. Here I was telling all the other new guys, keep your rifle up, do this, do that, and it changes you, it makes you tough. And just like in basic training, they say the spirit of the bayonet is to kill. They train you to do that. And that's what you got to think. It's either him or myself. And so that's the thought process that started working in me, and I kind of got into it because you're out there. You don't come in for a whole month. That's where you live. You don't take a bath for a month. And most people didn't brush their teeth and waste their water on brushing their teeth or shaving, because that water was too precious. Over 100 and some degree heat. And we get in little battles, and sometimes you drop from heat exhaustion. One time the guys were making everybody go down and saying, hush. And so I noticed the guys were ringing a bomb crater up there. Then all of a sudden they let loose. Well, I guess some VC was down there taking a bath, and they took care of them. There's a lot of things they shouldn't have done, but they did. And one guy carried 6 penny nails in his pocket, and then if we killed a bunch on the trail, they'd pile the bodies up after they went through them, and then they'd pull a first cab patch off and put it on the forehead and drive that nail in the forehead. There was a calling card and saying, don't mess with us. We're the ones that took care of this. But and they thought it was funny. It was kind of like a hazing, you might say, or orientation. They made us jump over that pile of bodies, us new guys, when we took off. And so many flies I've never seen in my life. They just come up into your face. You couldn't even see. And then we'd come up across a cache of rice. And they'd either do one or two things with it. They'd either send it back for the population, for the people, or they'd have the choppers bring out diesel fuel and pour all over it and burn it and let it smoke, so they'd know they wanted them to know. But we got in several of those fights. One time I remember when I was an assistant 60 machine gunner carrying all those ammo belts. Excuse me. And we got hit from the tree line. Well, we dropped where you are, and I happened to drop behind a log. Well, the gunner was up here, and he has only a starter belt in his 60 machine gun. And I knew I had to get up there, but the VC was raking the area, and you wouldn't dare poke your head up. I said, I've got to get up there, or we're not going to get any fire laid down. So as soon as they raked the area, I skinnied over the log, and as soon as I did, the bullets come right behind me. I thought I got hit in the boot, but I didn't. I got up and hooked up, and we started laying fire down the tree line. Called in a Blue Max, which is a Cobra gunship, and he raked the area, and pretty soon it all got quiet. So we did a recon, went down there and check out, and they'd had dug foxholes in the tree line waiting for us to come that way. And what was unique about that, there was one VC standing up in his foxhole with his hands on the AK, but he didn't have a head. One of those rounds from the chopper had hit him, direct hit, and he was standing up in there. You saw all kinds of stuff like this.
Give me some examples now. Did you come in on the Cobras? Did you land on an LZ? I mean, in and out?
We went to LZ St. Barbara, and we stayed a night or two pulling guard duty until they got us assigned to an area or a company, which is Baker Company. And even that night, the VC were out there throwing rockets in to try to hurt people and do away with the big guns, but all they'd do is blow up on the barrels, and it wouldn't affect them a bit. And then in a couple of days, they took us by Huey, the chopper, regular workhorse to the whole bunch, and they took us all out. There was about 8 to 10 choppers all ferrying us all out there, and they'd pack C4 around trees and blow them, and that way it'd give the choppers an area they could land down in the jungle or hover, and we'd drop out with all the C rations and all the new guys and all the water and ammo. We got logged every other day. We got new supplies every other day. And that's when I hooked up with the company, and then we took off, and I got ambushed within those first 2 hours.
Tell me now, give me just a little bit of history of the first air cav, how it came into being, and what it was.
Well, it originally started as a horse detachment, which they were the Cavalry. And in fact, that was the unit that General Custer was in. He started that. And it evolved into new modern warfare and new modern ways of getting there, so they went from horse. Actually, the name of our battalion is the 1st Air Cav Air Mobile, and that's what they mean. We can get around by a chopper when all the other battalions cannot. They don't do that. They use ground methods, or they may take them out by chopper and drop them, and then they have to walk out and walk in and do all that by foot or tanks. But so we had the use of all the choppers. Anytime we went from one place to another, we got choppered out. I remember one night, about 3:30 in the morning, they got us all up, said, go, let's saddle up, get your stuff together. And that's why it's important to keep all your things close. Never let go of that weapon. Never lay it down, never have it where you're not touching it. And so we got up and got going, and they used the flashlight with the little red filter on it, and we got through the jungle out to a clearing, and they used their flashlights and waved, and here come all the choppers in, and we hopped on those and got out of there quick. It was a fast deal. We didn't know why. They didn't tell us. But then later on, that next morning when we woke up where they took us, we found out they had a B-52 strike, and you cannot be within 10 miles of a B-52 strike, and we were within about 7, and so they got us out of there. And then they put us back in, took the choppers and took us all back out, and we had to go in and recon the area, and I was just amazed. One bomb would take a crater big enough to land a helicopter in, and it lays trees back. And the water down there, you can just scoop it up and drink it. It's just this crystal clear blue water. And we walked double file, one on each side of that bomb crater, and it's like, wow, those guys are way over there. One bomb. I can understand why they didn't want you within 10 miles. That was to it was to get rid of the foliage and the trees to deny cover for the enemy.
So the 1st Air Cav, or the Air Mobile Division, was patterned off of, you said, Custer, Horsemen, and how did the helicopters come into play with that?
Well, instead of horses, they just started using Hueys. Hueys you could mass produce those, and you could add firepower. You could take it away, or you can make a medevac chopper out of it, put a cross on it. It was a workhorse. You could do anything with it. It wasn't a specialized helicopter. So it was mass produced, just like a Yugo or something like that. It would they could put it out and they could add things to it and make it anything they wanted to. It did carry the firepower, some of them did.
Well, what's fascinating to me with World War II were the Higgins boats, the landing ground that took the troops in. And to Vietnam, the equivalent to me would be the Hueys, taking the soldiers
Correct.
or the Marines in and out of landing areas. So in my mind, the ramps going down, the World War II guys are piling out. In Vietnam, they have choppers setting down or not setting down, and they're jumping out in the hot LZ. And so there's a similarity there. So I'm fascinated with the Huey and what's the sound that Huey makes?
Yeah, it's about correct.
Two blades.
And there was a little story of going out. Of course, I was brand new. I had never ridden on a chopper before. Had all my extra 80 pounds on my back. That's a lot to carry. But we had it on there, and we riding on the sides, and all the boxes of C rations were stacked in the middle. So there was new guys on either side of open doors. You always had open doors and had a door gunner on each side. And then you kept your foot on the skids. Well, the chopper pilot banked to turn, and here come all these C rations on me. So in desperation, I grabbed a hold of the edge of the door, and it pushed me out the door and around facing the skin of the plane with my feet on the skids. If I hadn't grabbed a hold of the edge of that door opening, I would have probably went right straight down the jungle. You just got to be aware of everything. There's nobody taking care of you but you. And that's what they always told us, and I learned that.
Do you remember your first time on a Huey? I mean, is it still vivid in your mind, or is it just kind of with all the...
Oh, I can see everything. Yeah. And that was the first trip that I'd taken when that happened. And then they blew the trees out with C4 so they could land down in the jungle. They never would completely land on the ground. They'd hover, and they'd drop stuff out, and you had to be able to jump out while it was up in the air, whether it was over elephant grass or whether it was up over trees and jungle.
Was there an excitement, an adrenaline rush getting on those Hueys and going into an area? I mean, the movies glamorize it, but was there an adrenaline rush, or was there an excitement?
Well, you could feel it inside. It was like a flow, a warm feeling that come across, and you need to be aware of your surroundings. You can't it's not like taking a nice leisurely ride. You just got to be watching everywhere. All the time we were riding, we were watching the jungle for maybe a sniper or something like that, to be watching for us. But luckily, that first ride out, I didn't have that problem. But that's why the helicopter pilots wanted you out quick, and so they could get out of there. Because the hydraulics of that Huey, you hit it one place, and it's ruined the whole control of the plane. It's done. And we come upon a lot of them down when we were out humping in the jungle, that everything burns on those things but the engine and the back rotor.
Were there instances where you were being shot at in a helicopter and or landing on did you ever land in a hot LZ?
There was a couple of times we did.
Give me, what do you remember about that ride in, and what was happening? What were your missions?
Well, they kind of warned us that we might be getting into a hot area this time. And so we were ready for it. We had our round locked and loaded and chambered, ready to go, safety off. And the chop pilots were just pushing us all the time. When I'm down there, you guys get off here as soon as you can. And so we jumped off, and boy, he was out of there in a minute. And we'd crouch in the elephant grass, and they told us to look out to the outside. And as soon as that first wave of choppers come in, we headed for the tree line, and we started getting fire from the other side. And we got down there crawling in that elephant grass to get to the tree line, and then standing up, and then kind of get our bearings about where the enemy may be firing. So then we started directing our fire to that tree line for the next wave to come in. And there was a time that I know that we had to go help the Marines because they didn't have choppers like we did. So they had to send all of us over to Hot LZ to help the Marines at one point, wherever they were. I don't remember, they didn't tell us where it was. They just said, you guys are going to go help a bunch and get this thing cleaned up, and then you'll get back to your job.
Were there times that when you landed that they were shooting at you, or was it just pretty much nothing going on?
Most of the time there was nothing going on because our main mission was to ambush the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I remember the time that our CO told us, gentlemen, I just want to let you know that we're not where where we are. And they said, what? Well, I guess at that time, Nixon was making a statement on the news that we were not in Cambodia. And in effect, we were in Cambodia on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, because the Ho Chi Minh Trail goes over into Cambodia and comes back into Vietnam at different points before it gets up to Hanoi. And we happened to be over there. That's where we were ambushing the troops. And we were in Cambodia when he said we were not. So we thought, and all the time you're out there, one of the rules is you do not talk in your voice. It's always a whisper, never. In fact, if you're sleeping at night and you hear your buddy snoring, you got to rouse them up and wake them up so they'll quit doing that. Everything is watched. But you know, I don't care what you did. The next morning when we took off for a new site, there was elephant grass out where we were, and out in the outer perimeters that was smashed down. They'd been out there listening and watching us. They never always shot at us. They just watched us to see where we were, where were we going, and it was kind of creepy to come out in the morning and know that they'd been out there all night watching us and listening when they could have probably ambushed us or fired at us. But we had to dig a foxhole every night. Every night we had a foxhole, and it had about 4 or 5 people. And they said it's amazing how many people you can get in a foxhole when you're getting mortars coming down on you. But that was a requirement. Every night we had to have a foxhole dug for everybody.
Did you lose any close friends or have friends that were wounded or killed over there?
I did. I had one real close friend that lost his life. He wasn't even out of the LZ, and he was running for cover, and a round hit too close to him. His name was Douglas Bettle. I mean, he's from Arkansas City, Kansas, and he was quite a guy. He was cut up, and he kept everybody laughing, because when we were out at Fort Carson, Colorado, as activated National Guard, he kept everybody in good spirits and pulling pranks and keeping us all laughing. And it was quite a shock to hear when he got killed.
Kent, what was maybe the most difficult? You may have already described it in the first 2 weeks, but was there a more difficult situation in Vietnam in the combat areas than not, or something that was harder for you to see, or was there something that was more difficult than other? Or
no, after a while, well, I'll tell you what, and a lot of GIs felt like this, and they didn't tell you this, but if you lose your big toe, you're out of combat, and all the GIs knew this. And they had booby traps called toe poppers. And if they saw one, they'd look around and see if anybody's watching, then they'd go over and step on it, and then they'd call for a medic. Well, oh, you stepped on a booby trap. I'm going to get you out of here, and you're going to get a desk job, and they'd never know. And about everybody thought of this at one time or another, because it's hard work out there, especially the first few weeks. In the first few weeks, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm out of shape. I can't hump this 80 pounds on my back. I feel like throwing up all the time. There's no way. I can't do this for a year. So, and I'm admitting this. But I thought about shooting my big toe off too, just like a lot of the guys did. So one night before the log time, which was the next morning, I had the 16 against my boot. Just try to imagine what it might feel like if I did that. And I didn't notice it, but one guy sat on one side of me, another guy sat on the other side. They were my cohorts out there. One was a machine gunner from another platoon, and one of them said, "You don't want to do that." And I said, "Well, do what?" Like I invented it. And they started talking to me and using a little psychology on me and saying, you know, after you get into this, it won't be that bad. It's just, you know, the statistics show that not everybody gets killed that comes out here. So they started talking to me and getting to my head, and after that, I was fine. After that, I was just as good a trooper as the rest of them, and I made it fine. After that, my thought process was good, and I didn't have any more problems. I didn't think about that anymore. And from then on, I was able to hump and carry all that stuff, and it didn't bother me. And going through the rain, the monsoons, and that's when I started being assistant gunner, carrying all that extra belt ammo. And then just before I got out of there, I was a 60, carrying that on my shoulder when I was humping through the jungle. After a while, you just do it.
What, you know, was there a camaraderie with the guys like there were, like I talked to the Marines and all that? Is there a camaraderie in Vietnam?
Oh yeah, that's where you learn a lot. And back then there was still the race issue, where the races were separated. When I grew up, you're a product of your environment. The African American had their own swimming pool, and the white people had their own. Well, that's all we knew. But you know, when I got over there, I found out their blood was just as red as ours. And I had a black guy save my life, and I was just amazed at this stuff, you know. And so pretty soon I became friends with a lot of the black guys. And I found out, well, these are pretty good guys, you know, because all I knew was how I was raised. And pretty soon you grab each other. I mean, you're just buddies. You don't look at skin color. You're all in this together, and you're covering each other's back. That's what you're doing. And I learned a lot of good lessons over there in this respect.
That's good to hear. I'm going to ask you something, and just realize I've learned a lot through hearsay, some of the stuff you hear in the news, but was there really a drug thing in Vietnam? I mean, you hear people, they say, oh, they come back all messed up and all this, and no, I've never really heard it from a Vietnam veteran, so I'm going to ask you, was there drug usage? I mean, you don't have to, this is just for, you know, I'm going to edit all this, but was drugs a problem in Vietnam?
Here's the situation with that. There was and there wasn't. When you were out in the boonies, they catch you doing any of that stuff, and you have a rifle butt upside your head, because the guy says, you're not getting me killed because you're having a high old time over here. So there was none of that, very little, if any, out in the boonies, because you wanted to have your mind sharp where you knew and you heard things and everything wasn't a blur. But now the rear, it was everywhere. Oh, we had a bunker that we used in case of rocket attack. Every night smoke rolled out of there. Nobody was ever arrested for it. Nobody. It went on everywhere. Everybody smoked. And little kids would walk through the motor pool when we'd be taking a break, and they'd have big bags of white powder, and they'd want to sell it to you. Of course, we weren't going to buy that stuff. And $5 you could have that. I learned how to smuggle when I was over there. A lot of these people sent this stuff home inside of speakers or in tubes. They knew exactly how much camera equipment weighed, and they'd call it a camera tripod, and they'd line it with tinfoil so the x-ray machine couldn't see in it, and they'd ship like guns home, AK-47 parts, break it down, and they'd ship dope home. I learned all that stuff. But I was 24 when I was over there. Most of the kids were 19, 20. They called me an old man. And I never had an interest in trying to do all that drug stuff. And later on, I'd ask a counselor, why didn't I feel like I wanted to try that? He said, well, you got to realize you were older than most of them. You were past the years of experimentation. So, and these other guys, they were right in that prime where they wanted to try things. I didn't even have a desire to try it. There was plenty of it around. I remember in my barracks one time, my roommate, he come down the aisle, looked like his eyes were targets. And he says, Keene, look at my beer. That's good. And I looked in there was nothing but 3 raw eggs. Yet he thought it was beer. I mean, this was all over.
What are they smoking, dope? Marijuana?
Pretty much. And they had access to a lot of the white powder, which poppies and stuff were big time. And they raised this. I guess it was the white powder. They'd grind this up into white powder, and you could buy all that stuff and sniff it, and it'd get you high. All the older ladies, the Vietnamese ladies over there, would chew what they call betel nut. It'd turn their teeth black. And it's kind of like chewing tobacco back here in the States.
Well, you kind of wonder how this was initiated over there. Somebody brought it over one day and it just caught on, and then, was it the stress of the war, or what was it?
It helped people forget where they were. Some people had trouble dealing with it over there. Now myself, I made something good out of being there. I thought I might as well do it, so I swam in their pool. I run every day. I worked out. I in the rear, and I set up a stereo studio where I did a lot of recording and making tapes and music. I love music anyway, and I sold it. You have a way of making money over there. A lot of guys would go to PX and buy these little refrigerators, and then they'd go buy these cases of pop, and they'd come back, stick it in the refrigerator. They'd pay 10 cents a can for it, pull it out cold, and sell it to you for 30 cents a can. That was their way of making money. You either were into stereo stuff or you were into cameras. And I happened to be into the stereo equipment, and I made money doing that on the side. But I never felt like doing any kind of drugs. I just wasn't interested in it. I didn't have it.
So they're smoking dope and sniffing cocaine?
Well, it could have been. It was white powder. And these little kids would come through the motor pool where we had a computer van set up, and they'd either try to sell the bags of powder or they'd try to sell their sister. And they say, "You buy my sister." I don't want her. She virgin. Yeah, how many times? Oh, no, one time. So, you know, these little kids would be trying, and they'd try to sell Coke in bottles, and they'd tell you, never buy that. Because what they would do, they'd put glass and pieces of metal and oil and everything in that Coke. So you'd buy it and drink it, and then you got problems. And so they just said, don't mess with the people. They'd steal our dogs. We had a couple of mascots, male and female, and they kept having puppies, and we know that these little puppies would disappear. Well, we had population come in, and they'd clean up our hooch and iron clothes and wash and dust and what have you. Well, at night, I guess we discovered they'd put these dogs, little puppies, under their jacket or coat, and they'd take them off post with them. And they'd raise them, and then they'd eat them.
Where's the leadership at during all this stuff behind the lines? I mean, are they supervising their troops who are smoking dope? I mean, what if you got ambushed? I mean, what are they thinking about, you know?
That we hardly ever saw them. They hardly ever saw the head people. We just did our job, and the headquarters was across the motor pool. We never saw these guys down our barracks. One time, the first sergeant said he was going to try to get rid of all our dogs. Well, as in World War II, a dog is kind of like a mascot for a GI. They adopt them, and it's cute, nothing like a cute little puppy or whatever. And we said, "You're not taking our dogs." So just to show you how the law was ours over there, we knew the guy that cut all the orders, and he cut the orders for this first sergeant to be sent out to a scout dog platoon. You know, that wasn't correct, but that's how you did it. You didn't make enemies over there. And so we got rid of him, and we never had any problem with anybody wanting to take our dogs from us. It's just a lot of things like that went on over there. If you got to know the right person, you could get about anything. You can get about anything.
Well, again, my mind is like thinking World War II. Would they have smoked dope in World War II? You know, but I'm thinking in combat situations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they even had alcohol,
No.
But it's like, I wonder what happened down the couple of decades into Vietnam and all that. And was it more stressful than World War II? And was it the unknown? Was it an unpopular war? What all the adjectives that described what it was really like in Vietnam, and then come back home and look back at it, 30, 40 years later. I mean,
well, I think it was a product of the lifestyle. Like back in the States, that dope had already started coming out because of the hippie revolution, and they started smoking it and being happy, and if it feels good, do it. And it carried over there, and I think the Vietnamese capitalized on this the way to make money. Because you could see huts and buildings made out of Coca-Cola product crates. I mean, they'd take anything, and if you left your deuce and a half sitting there, it'd be gone. A little kid would be hopping up in there, and he'd steal that. So they took advantage of knowing all the background and history of what the GIs liked, and they made money doing that. And I think that it actually came from what we were already used to in the States. And then the Vietnamese said, well, they like this. That's a big thing over there. Let's try to sell this. Because they already had this poppy stuff and betel nut and what have you over there already. And so it just evolved, I think, into that. And the guys did want to forget, and they liked to get high. And then there was a lot of beer flowing. And I don't even think World War II guys had, even, like you said, even beer. But there was a lot of that over there.
So, but you said they were smoking dope. Marijuana. They're not getting that from the Vietnamese, are they?
Well, that was smuggled over.
Okay.
That was smuggled over. And like I said, I learned how to smuggle when I was over there. And for this example, I was pretty new, and I still didn't want to do anything wrong. I didn't want to get caught. So this one guy I got acquainted with, his main mission was to go out to down choppers and try to recover all the equipment he could off of there, like all the weapons, and bring them back. Well, he'd sell them and write it off as government loss, like he didn't find it. He offered to sell me a .45 pistol one day for $15. And I said, ooh, I'll get caught. So I was too new yet. I didn't know the ins and outs of all the ways of how everybody did things over there. So I said, no, no, thank you. I don't want to get caught. He said, you won't. Well, I learned later I could have bought that for $15 and sent it back to the States all broken down. Nobody had ever been the wiser.
Do you think the drug usage hindered the warfare over there or in any way, or did it help it?
I don't think it hurt out in the jungle part. And the people back here, I just don't see it hindering it so much because, and on the AFVN, the Armed Forces Television Studio, they would put out advertisements like commercials and say, they'd have a guy acting like he was high, and they'd try to combat this stuff. And they'd all the time try to put out programs to try to keep you from getting in the drugs, but the rear, you couldn't stop that. At one time when I got back to the States, they had a statistics on the Vietnam veterans, and at one time there was 80,000 Vietnam veterans in prisons and jails for one thing or another at one time. A general had made this statement that they did all this study and found out. But that's when they didn't have any counseling when you came back. You could be shooting somebody, and in 72 hours you'll be sitting on your front porch. That's just how fast you got sent back. World War II, they would, if you were married, the government would put you up and your spouse in a motel or a hotel and let you kind of wind down and give you 1 to 2 weeks, all on the expense of the government. But they didn't with Vietnam. They got them back home as soon as they could and forgot about them. Never asked if you had a problem. So all that went back out into the population.
Did men go into combat high, you think?
I don't think, for the most part, I didn't see that where I was. They were pretty straight when it come to that because they wanted all their faculties. They wanted to be sharp. And like I said, if they ever caught you doing it, you better not be doing it or you'll have a rifle butt upside your head or it'll be slapping you, telling you to get rid of that stuff. And every other day we got logged with ammo and all our supplies. And we also got a duffel bag with canned pop in it. And they try to throw beer in there, but nobody wanted the beer out there. And the ice was practically melted by the time we got it because it was so hot. But we'd always grab the 2 cans of pop. Nobody ever took the beer out there. Everything was pretty clean when it come to the jungle warfare.
This is a question I want to ask you regarding the Vietnam veterans coming home and really, I've heard stories, people were spit on, they were treated terrible, baby killers, I mean the whole thing. I mean, what happened? What really happened with the war? Was it an unpopular war? Did they come home to a celebration, or was there any acknowledgement of them coming home? Tell me what happened.
Not a bit. When I come home to Travis, of course you're gone out of the loop for about a year. You don't know what's going on back there so much, and they're not going to tell you except that what the news they want you to know. And when we come back into Travis, we were headed towards the terminal, all of us in the group as Vietnam veterans. And all of a sudden, these hippies were all through bands around their head and flowers and stuff, and they started calling us baby killers. And I said, man, I didn't kill no baby, did you? I said, no. And they started throwing human excrement at us. They had brought in a bag. And so our sergeant said, go this way. So we had to go clear around another way and get in the buses. And they met us down the field the ways by a fence. We couldn't even go through the terminal. So we had to be, and I was very puzzled then, we all were, we thought, what in the world? We couldn't understand this. We didn't do any of that stuff. But I think it was generated by a bunch of the people that wanted to go against the establishment and all that. That started all that stuff, and of course the marches and the protests, and we didn't know what all went on when we were over there. We were just doing what we were told to do and trying to stay alive so we can come back home.
There was a lot of anti-war sentimentism. I mean, people didn't support the troops like they did in World War II. Where did
Not a
they
bit.
came from?
They didn't. We didn't even talk about it. And if I did talk about it, the younger ones said, oh, it wasn't that bad. So I just shut up. From then on, I didn't talk about it to anybody. I didn't tell them I'd been there, nothing. None of us did. I had to talk to my friends that were over there. And they said, no, there's no sense in mentioning it because nobody wants to hear about it. They didn't care. I had the same dream almost every month for 14 years until I got help. And that dream was, and I'd go to bed, and I'd wake up about 2:33 in the morning. I'd be laying in bed with my wife, and all of a sudden I'd look around and I'd see these guys in black pajamas and pointed straw hats with AK-47s all around my bed. And I wouldn't dare move. I started shallow breathing, like all the things that I'd learned. and I wouldn't even move my eyes. I wouldn't even blink because I thought they would see me. They'd catch that little motion. And I was all tensed up, and I'd be stiff as a board, and then pretty soon I'd start realizing where I was and that I was in bed at home. And then I'd start taking deep breaths, sat up on the bed for a while and take some good breaths to get back to normal. And after a while, I'd go back to bed, I'd be all right. That happened almost every month for 14 years. And finally at work one day, I tried to talk about something, and no words had come out. I couldn't speak. And it was just like I'm stuck. It was coming back to me. And a guy that had worked with veterans saw this, and he come right over. And they sent me home. He said, I'm getting you an appointment tomorrow at the vet center. That was in Kansas City. And I went down there. I knew he was a psychiatrist, but I said, maybe this is what I need. I went down there, and I sat down there and talked to him for 2 hours, and he pulled all the stuff out of me. And all the stuff started coming out, all flowing out. He had me come back in 2 weeks and bring pictures. I said, okay, we're doing this. And after that, this stuff all just come out. And everything started leveling off after that, and I slowly got over this. But all the sounds I'd heard, the crickets and the choppers in the sky, it all bring back a lot of memories, and sometimes I'd cry about that. But it all got better. I quit having the dreams, and that's why I said it's too bad they couldn't have talked to every veteran and run them through a screening to see if they needed help or had any problems. It has saved my 14 years of all that pent-up emotion and stress that I had.
Well, that was a question I had, Kent, was how come so many men come home and they're all messed up? Was it the drugs, or was it just the combat?
It was the combat, and no way to relieve your stress. There was no way. They'd give you a week, 7 days of R&R, and they'd give you 7 days of leave, and you could go anywhere you wanted. But that didn't really do it, because you come right back to the same situation, because you don't know who your friend is. You never knew who your friend was. Now, World War II, the people they liberated were so thankful they did anything they could for our GIs, because we kept what we took. We swept across Europe gradually, and we kept the towns and established headquarters or whatever in those towns, and those people just was so appreciative to get out from under the German hand. They'd do anything, and you could trust them. But over there, you couldn't trust anybody. I was riding through Saigon in a bus, and of course, all the buses had screen on them. I couldn't figure that out until I went through Saigon once, and a little kid ran out of a crowd and threw a grenade up on the bus, and it bounced off. Of course, it wouldn't go through the window, and it blew up in the crowd. One guy said he was walking down the street, and this little kid ran out of the crowd and grabbed his watch off his hand and was out before he could do anything. I mean, you just couldn't, you looked at everyone with suspicion there. I didn't trust any of them. I just stayed with my own group and my own buddies, and I didn't associate much with those guys, Do
you think the combat was worse than what happened on Iwo Jima with the Japanese? I mean, again, coming home, and then you hear about I know a guy personally that was messed up from Vietnam, and I thought maybe it was a combination of drugs and combat, and it was the battle after talking to these Iwo Jima guys. Oh my gosh, But do you think it was that worse than World War II, the combat? Or?
No, I don't think it was. In a lot of ways, I think World War II, I mean, you can see the footage of these guys coming on the beach. What do they got to do? Some of them drowned from the weight of their equipment. You didn't have a choice, and you had no cover. You just had to go and hope the rounds didn't get you. At least we had a jungle that we could kind of get in, and whether it kept the bullet from coming through or not, but they didn't always know where you were. You just had to use other things, like you couldn't talk. I didn't even know what my voice sounded like for 30 days. We'd come in once a month and take a bath. And we'd have an overnight time where they'd cook us hamburgers, and we could take a bath, relax, sleep, play cards, and go back out for another 30. But and you didn't wear underwear, because if you did, you'd be walking like a cowboy after the first day. So we didn't do that, but I don't think it was any worse than World War II. Those poor guys in World War II sometimes didn't have it very, very well. Things weren't organized as well. Here they had gliders coming down in the wrong places. They parachuted people in the wrong places and got picked off as they were floating down. In trying to do things in the dark. They didn't have all the equipment and the techniques that we had in Vietnam. So I don't think we had it any worse.
So it was the stress thing possibly, like you said, there
Yes.
was, then they call it, I guess, post-traumatic stress syndrome. There wasn't really a debriefing time between the war zone and coming home, and there was a transition that maybe never happened, and that's
Exactly. You went
there's
right.
A lot of them out there right now.
Yeah, yeah. They're still. I still see them, and they're still crazy, so to speak.
Like walking zombies.
Oh yeah, this one guy that works where I do. I'm not going to name his name, but he's still a little. People stay away from him because he never got any counseling. Some of them don't want it, but I think everybody should have had it. I wish I'd have had it sooner. I wasn't real nice to my wife because I thought I was the same old boy. But everybody said, no, you're not. You're different. And the one thing that was different about me that I realized before I went over there, for some reason, I like to be around people. I just wanted to be around people. I wanted plenty of friends. And ever since I've come back, and I'm still that way, it's nothing against anybody. I don't care if I have a best friend. I'm happy down there and downstairs doing what I do, playing with my music or working on my cars. I don't need anybody. I'm not trying to be nasty about it, but it's just my feeling now since I come back. I don't have a best friend. I don't care if I do. I mean, it doesn't bother me a bit. In that respect, I see where that's changed me since I went over there and then I came back.
Kent, are you proud of what you did in Vietnam?
I'm proud of the job I did because I think I did the best job I could. I have some letters from some of my superiors that told us appreciated what I did, my job over there, and within 2 hours I earned the C.I.B, Combat Infantry Badge, and I did the job I was supposed to. I kept my nose clean and I did everything I was supposed to do.
Looking back, 35, 40 years back to Vietnam, what significance does it have in your life? Does it mean anything to you today, Vietnam? I mean, the war, you being a veteran, does that have any meaning in your life?
I have a lot of pride more in my country and the flag and singing the national anthem and America the Beautiful, and I get very emotional anymore. I never used to do that, but I cry at a lot of things like that when I hear the music and the singing and see the flag. It just makes me feel real good. Probably better than it ever did before. I feel so much good inside, you know. I feel proud to be what I did. I didn't at first, but now I feel proud of what I did and the fact that I was there. I get a lot of compliments. And even the people at Boeing, my group, they went together and bought me a little brick that put out by the flagpoles they established for veterans. And I get to say where I was, first air cav, and my rank, and when I was there. And they pitched in and all bought that for me, and that was pretty emotional. I really appreciated that.
Have you seen the Vietnam Wall in Washington?
I don't know if I could go. I've gone to the traveling wall, and that was tough, and I've always looked for Doug's name and found it on what panel. But I even watch movies and stories about the wall, and I just cry. I don't know if I could make it through there or not. Maybe I'd like to go, but I don't know if I could handle it or not, because there's some guys on there I was in National Guard with that didn't make it back also. I wasn't quite as close to them, but we were all together in the same unit before we all went over.
What do you think it is about being there that would overwhelm you? Just the visual sight of 50-some thousand names, or finding your buddies? What would probably be hard?
Here's the thing that probably would get me more than anything is the fact that, was this worth it? I mean, it fell within a half a day. All these guys died for that. And my question is, for what? What did we get out of it? What was it for? I just don't see anything. The accomplishment, I don't know if we ever accomplished anything as far as the politics part of it or winning the people over, and that probably bothers me more than anything, and seeing all those guys that gave their life for this. And in World War II, we can see where we stopped a threat to the world, but this is a little different. I just don't see the end result out of it. You know, that's me, but I just don't.
Well, I've been there and I've seen it, and I'm not a veteran, but boy, I tell you what, it's a moving sight, and just to touch the names, you know, you see pictures of that. There's something about that, and then there's always flowers and stuff. But I'm going to ask you a question I've asked all the World War II veterans at the end of the interview, which we're just about at. But what does freedom mean to you, Kent? What does freedom mean to you as a veteran?
Freedom is, to me, is caring about somebody besides yourself. In other words, if we just stayed in our own little country and didn't care about some of these other people, I don't think it'd be very good. I don't think it'd be good for the world. Freedom is maybe fighting it on whatever front there is, if there's for the democracy of the people. Because look what we did for the people. They were so appreciative. If we'd have stayed home and said, no, we're not getting involved, what would have happened? And freedom is to be able to do what you want to do and worship the way you want to worship and vote the way you want to vote. And freedom is not free. It's not free. You got to give something. You have to. You got to be willing to do it. It's not going to just happen. You got to give what you can do. You got to be willing to do it from yourself, inside here. And you got to have a feeling like, you know, I'm doing this for my country, for my people. And you got to have that feeling you're never going to make it.
What about the price for freedom? Tell me about that.
Oh, it's quite a price, but I think these guys would have wanted it that passed away, especially the World War II guys. I mean, they're out there giving everything. I'm telling you, I respect these guys so much, and I'm so interested in what they have to say. It's just amazing to me what they went through. And these guys were dedicated, true Americans. They were giving everything they had. And I run across a lot of people in Vietnam, but when I got out in Vietnam, I asked some of the guys, I said, what are we here for? Because I didn't know. I said, we here to save women and kids, or what? We don't care nothing about them. The attitude was not very good. And I couldn't get a good attitude from these guys. I just want to stay alive and get home. But then you found the guys that were there that we're going to try to do the best we can, because there were some good people over there. I enjoyed it. I made some friends with some of the Vietnamese, and they were good people. But and I got to know the lady that kept our barracks, and she was a nice lady, and we were become friends. And it's just that you got to watch it. It wasn't the same, but I think you still ought to give everything you got. You have to give everything you got. If this is your job, let's try to do the best we can do.
You mentioned briefly about the crickets and helicopters. Have you been around an air base, especially in Wichita, probably a lot of air things here, but have you ever heard a helicopter and it just kind of, you caught yourself thinking back? Or
it all came back. If you hit like a nice cool night, which it was over there, and you hear crickets or the little things out there, and maybe a helicopter's coming from a base or something, all that memory comes. I can remember everything just like it was last night. Everything. I can tell you everything. All the stories, all the things I was in. I can see our log sites at night, where we bedded down, and I can see the trail, which we call the trotter. And I can see all the situations I was in where I didn't know if I was going to live or not. And there were a number of situations like that.
Are you a religious person?
I grew up in church, and I do believe in God.
Did you find yourself praying to God?
Oh.
Tell me just briefly.
And to me, I think it wasn't a foxhole prayer, because before I went over there, I'd kind of got on the little wild side. I was drinking and everything, and I got over there, and when I hit behind those two little trees, when we got ambushed, I was praying, and I said, you get me out of this, and that's it. I quit, and I kept my word on that. But a lot of people had foxhole prayers, they call them, and after it was all over, then they were right back in the same deal. But here's a little quick situation. That the instant that I was ambushed and got behind those two little trees, I talked to my mom after I got back, and we tried to get the timeline correct. And the best we can come up with, at that moment that I was ambushed, she said she had woken up in bed for some reason and felt the need to pray for me. She always prayed for us boys. And that was just at that exact time that I was ambushed, as much as we could come to a conclusion on that. And she said she just felt the need to pray for me. And then she did, and then she went back to sleep.
How old are you now?
I am 62 years old.
Okay, and your rank and your MOS again in Vietnam?
When I went over there, I was a PFC, and I earned battlefield commission, you might call it, and I was a PFC E3, and I earned my C.I.B., that combat infantry badge. That means you have been under fire within 2 hours. I come back, got a rear job. I was a Specialist 5. And then when I come back to the States and finished my time in the military, they made me a buck sergeant, E5. And before I got out early to go back to school, I was up for E6, Sergeant E6.
But what was your title? I'm going to put it on the screen. Keene and PFC. mortarman, artillery? What was your position?
I went over as an 81 millimeter mortar crew gunner, but I never got to do that job. So I was a rifleman. But when I left, I was a 60 millimeter machine gunner. That's what it was, 60 millimeter, assistant and a regular one.
Closing thoughts. What do you want the American people to know about the Vietnam War? That, you hear things, just for a couple of minutes, just tell me what you want the Americans to know about Vietnam. Good, bad?
I just wanted to know that we went through a lot of stuff over there that people didn't know about because it wasn't allowed on the 6 o'clock news. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot probably out there that not knowing you couldn't see 6 feet in front of you out in the jungle. You didn't have a clear field of vision, and you didn't know who you were fighting because that guy over there may be your enemy at night. It was just like it was so uncertain, and we went through a lot of heck over there in our own way. World War II did, and we went through it in our own way, but we tried to do the best we could over there. We tried to help the people the best we knew how. I did, and try to treat them with respect. And we just feel like that maybe we're shortchanged a little bit by our government. Our government had other ideas. There was other things going on that we didn't know about. But we did the best we could. We gave it our all while we were over there, and I want everybody to know that. And we went through a lot of stuff that they don't know about. Just real quick, for example, things you didn't see. My security man had a string of dried ears around his neck. He wore them. He cut them all off, and then he'd string them around and he was nutty. He was a little fruity out there. He'd shoot at leaves dropping out of trees, and it just affected people bad because you couldn't see. You didn't know who your enemy was. It was a little different. It was a guerrilla warfare. But I wanted to know we did the best we could do.
One more question. Do you want people to feel sorry for you or be proud of you?
I want them to be proud of me. Because whether I accomplished what our mission was, we did the best we could do. We did it all. We did what we had to do. We took our jobs, and that's why I saw everybody out there I was with. Every job, whether it was the grenade launcher, or a rifleman, or a machine gunner, I was amazed at these guys under fire. Just one guy changed out a melted down barrel and was 60 and kept on firing. I'll tell you, I'm just amazed at the guys I was with because they sure did their job. It was amazing.
Tell me why you're talking to me today. Did you feel a need to do this?
Yes, I want people to know about this because there's a lot that people don't know and they don't understand about even though people are out there are trying to thank you more now, and they understand and they realize a lot of this stuff now that they didn't at first. I still think there's a lot of things that, because we were so bound up and not talking about it for so many years, that the veterans now still don't come right out and just share openly. And it needs to be said. And I think more people like you need to interview these guys and get it out so the American people will actually know what went on.
Well, it's begun, and I'm grateful to be talking to you today and expressing my thank you for serving our country and what you've done, and putting this segment eventually alongside of these World War II and Korean stories. But I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. I hope it's okay. I've asked all the veterans to do this, and at the end of my films you can see why. But when I tell you, can I ask you to salute into the camera?
Yes, sir. You want me to stand? Or?
No, I want you to stay right there. Okay, sir, right into the camera. Salute.